Hey, this is Unbearably. When playing Penny, where you place your spider nest can make a huge difference in how effective you are at shutting down space for the enemy team, while also protecting your allies. If the enemy doesn't take your nest seriously, then taking out an overextended tank, or even a flanking DPS can mean winning the first fight with a numbers advantage. This is the second video in my series that will be going over the best places to put your spider nests and mine traps on every map. Hopefully by the time you're done watching this, you've learned at least one new trick. Throughout this video, I will be going over the best placements for Penny on the convergence map Klyntar, both for defense and for offense. Now, not all spots are as good as the next, but I will try to show you a variety of them so you don't feel locked into one spot every game. These are just the locations that I used in my climb to Grandmaster, so if you have any spots that aren't shown in this video, if they're working for you, then please comment them down below, since I'm always happy to learn new tricks for Penny. I just wanted to share what's been working for me so far. Before we get to the map, a quick rundown on the spider nest itself, including some hidden features for the nest that the game doesn't tell you. The nest has 350 life and creates a 12-meter web around it. Every 3 seconds, the nest produces 2 spider drones, and it can have up to 10 drones out at a time. These drones will attack any enemy that enters the web, with each doing 40 damage. You can extend the range of the web with your Cyber Bond or Web Snare abilities, which both leave behind a web on the ground, and you can have a maximum of 3 webs out at a time. These webs do not need to be perfectly touching each other for them to be counting as connected. You are able to leave a small gap between them, and your spider drones will travel through the webs as if they are still attached. Now, to correct a mistake in my last nest video, many of you pointed out in the comments that the increased healing from stacking Penny's webs doesn't actually apply when she's under full HP, and stacking webs actually only increases the healing for her overshield. So, to clarify everything, here's a full breakdown on how stacking webs affects Penny's healing and her overshield. Starting off down 200 health, it takes Penny roughly 8 seconds from when she stands on a web to reach full HP. That's about 25 healing per second. However, when she reaches full HP, she gains 150 overshield in about 3 seconds, which is 50 healing per second. Last time I checked this, I did it while Penny had full HP, so I didn't notice that her base healing was different than her overshield. When she stacks 2 webs on top of each other, it still takes 8 seconds for her to reach full HP, but now it only takes about 2 seconds to hit full shields, which is an increase to 75 healing per second. The healing remains the same when under full HP for 3 stacks, and 4 stacks as well, but the overshield increases to about 85 to 90 healing per second with 3 webs stacked up, and all the way to 100 with 4 webs on top of each other. I apologize for any confusion I caused before, but I still do think this is really strong, and I use it all the time in my games. Just make sure to stack webs during team fights instead of when you're out flanking alone. I love defending on Klyntar as Penny, since there are so many tight areas to fight in. By focusing on shutting down space for the enemy team with your nest and mine traps, Penny can completely lock down the main paths that the enemy likes to take. While doing this, she's also able to defend your backline from flankers just because of the close proximity. There are 3 different routes that the enemy team can take to attack you on Klyntar's first point, but I will start with the main path down the middle since it's what you'll see in 90% of your games. When the round starts, you want to rush the point and create a mine trap on this wall, as well as one on the side of these boxes, making sure to use at least 3 mines and to cover them with a web. These spots cover 2 areas that the enemy healers and ranged DPS love to stand, and by using 3 mines, you can make sure they die instantly if they walk into the wrong spot. Tanks also love to walk past these spots, which makes them much less likely to be cleared. Next, you come back and place your nest here behind these boxes. This spot is extremely powerful and really annoying for the enemy team to deal with. Eventually, the enemy team may destroy this wall, which makes your nest much more vulnerable, but if they begin heavily targeting it, I just move my nest inside this cubbyhole, which isn't as good of a defensive position, but will still help lock down the front path. Finally, once I have my nest set up, and based on the enemy team composition, I'll either place a mine trap right inside this door to help prevent the enemy from flanking, or I'll create a huge anti-tank mine right here. This trap is extremely powerful, so I usually focus on this instead of covering the door. This clip is a great example of showing how defensive this position is, as well as how effective it is to stack up your web charges. Check out how quickly my overshield is charging up, since I have healers keeping me topped off whenever it breaks. This game I'm solo tanking too, but even still you can see the enemy tanks just can't move forward without dying to my nest, so they just stand there and get picked off, or overextend and blow up. This is probably my favorite nest spot in the entire game. Even after my nest was destroyed, my allies are able to keep the enemy team distracted for a couple seconds until it's back up. After that, between my mines and my nest, the enemy team's next attack just falls apart.
Go behind.
You got anything for this? Oh, nice. Let's go.
This next path that the enemy might choose to attack you from has become more popular recently, but I've still only seen it in a couple high-level games. The enemy team goes on this path to your left and breaks down this wall. This can be pretty annoying, but I've found that it's pretty rare for the enemy to actually fully commit to this path, so as soon as I realize what's happening, I try to set a mine trap on top of these boxes. I really want the enemy team to go back to taking the main path, so I'll stand on these boxes and I'll try to suppress the enemy team. With a little bit of support from mine, we're usually able to push them back to the main path. I also keep my nest in its original position so as to stop any enemies from flanking around this bend here while we're distracted. If your team is able to successfully push them out of this area once, it's really quite rare for the enemy team to try again, and they'll usually just go back to using the main path or taking a strange portal. Here is a pretty good example of what to do. The enemy team is attacking from the flank, so I position myself on top of the boxes and do my best to place pressure on the enemy team up there. My goal is to get them to rethink coming through this hole in the wall and to instead come around the corner to the main entrance where my mines and nest are set up. Once they begin pivoting back to the middle, I'm able to shift my attention back to the easier to defend locations and easily shut down the push. Here I lost my nest, so my focus was on backing up and supporting my team. Peni is also quite decent at destroying Groot walls and Namor turrets and even other Peni nests, so it's very important to focus these when possible. I'll finish showing you this team fight so that you can see how even in a hectic battle with a bunch of healer ults going on, by focusing on your placements, you can still add a bunch of value to your team. You probably could have guessed, but the next route enemy teams take to attack the first point is through a Doctor Strange portal. By now, the common place to see the portal is right here on the upper level. So as soon as you realize that the enemies are about to come through a portal, move your nest right up against this wall. The webs from your nest will climb up the side of this wall, which you could then extend even further by placing your extra webs up on the high ground where the enemies will be standing. This forces the enemy to jump down from the high ground or risk taking consistent damage from your spider nest. Another reason why this point is great is because once the enemies have jumped down, they need to fully turn around if they want to destroy your spider nest instead of dealing with you or your team. If they refuse to come down, you can harass the enemy with mines or by setting up a trap for when they jump down, which can both be effective ways of dealing with this situation. As soon as I hear the portal sound, I turn around and rush to set my nests next to the wall. I then start spreading my webs and laying mines on the upper floor so I could shut down as much space as I can. Since they're unable to fight comfortably up top, the enemy team splits up and gets taken out one by one, and we're able to defend the point. When you lose the first point, usually you won't have enough time for your entire team to be ready to defend in this room. I like to instead defend in the next hallway and then return to set up here if we're able to wipe out the enemy team. Assuming you do have time to set up here, I place my nest behind this bump on the ground. If the enemy team are heavily focusing your nest, or they have a Groot on their team which can easily destroy it, then I instead place my nest back a little bit on this ramp. They're both really quite similar with their ability to cover this upper area from flankers, while also webbing most of the main path as well. However, the first nest is a little bit better at protecting the road, while the second nest is more defensive and better at protecting your backline. You can place mine traps along these walls and by this box to catch enemy healers as they walk up, and if you're dealing with annoying flankers, then extend your web into this hallway and place a mine trap right by this pillar. Here we just wiped out the enemy team, so I set up my nest and some mine traps. Their Panther is in our back line, but since their tanks can't move forward without running into my nest, he ends up getting taken out all by himself. From there, my team is able to pick up the stragglers and continue the enemy team's stagger. This is a extremely strong defensive position, forcing the enemy team up this ramp and around the corner. I like to place my spider nest behind this wall, which helps cover most of the main path. It can also easily be extended to reach this upper platform as well, which helps prevent any flankers from going above. You're able to choose whether you want to place anti-healer mine traps along this back wall, anti-flanking mine traps up on this ledge, or a big anti-tank mine trap right next to this box. This position gives you the flexibility to target whatever is the biggest threat to your team. Usually I focus on getting picks on the healers, but when I'm facing 3 healer teams, it can be more useful for me to stack enough mines to one-shot a tank. You can see me placing a mine trap here. The spots from the last clip will also still work here since the enemies end up funneling down the same paths. I then start to work on my anti-tank mine to further lock down this corner. You can see that even with 2 healer ults between my kills and the strange ult, the enemy team's momentum was completely stopped and they weren't able to just push right through us. If the enemy team does end up pushing past the hallway, then your final chance to hold them back will be right here. You do not want your team fighting at the top of this ramp, as that is a choke point for the enemy team to gun you down. You instead want them to back up and force the enemy to come around this corner to fight. I like to place my nest on this ramp so that it covers most of the main path, as well as help block any flankers from coming through this room. If you have the time, you can try setting up mine traps along this back area where healers tend to gravitate when fighting downhill, but if not, I just focus on setting up a large anti-tank mine either at the top right of this ramp for when the enemy turns the corner, or similarly at the bottom of the ramp. Because the enemy team has to turn the corner if they want to heal or to do any damage, any tanks that overextend to this area can be easily blown up and destroyed. This clip is a fantastic example of why you don't want to defend in weak positions, and defensive teams choosing where to fight the enemy is very important. I definitely should have been more vocal in comms and asked my other tank to fall back so that we could defend with my nests. Instead, my team keeps fighting around that corner, and we lose a healer and eventually the entire point.
This is gonna hurt.
I almost never defend here with my nest. I think it's a little bit too close to the enemy spawn. So even if my teams push them all the way back after winning a team fight, I might just place some mine traps by either door, but I still find it's a little bit more reliable to then move back through the bone tunnel and defend with my nest there. For the first couple fights in this area, I like to place my nest behind this bone here, and some mine traps along the sides of the path in the tunnel, as well as right here so I can defend my nest. You can also focus on building a large anti-tank mine on one of these 2 spots, as tanks love to jump out of the tunnel and into them. After a couple of fights, the bone tunnel gets mostly destroyed, at which point I move my nest into this tunnel entrance, just deep enough to make it annoying for enemies to shoot. This still covers most of the road, as well as one of the anti-tank mine spots, while also defending from enemies flanking through this tunnel. This next clip takes place after we had already defended in the bone cave multiple times, and I've now moved my nest back. By standing here, the enemies would still have to move onto the webs if they want to damage my nest, which between that and some well-placed mines, allow me to quickly build my ult charge and help turn a kill into a full team wipe.
It's spider time! Double kill! This is gonna hurt.
When defending the final point, I like to put my nest right on this rock over here. This allows you to create a chain of webs under this tree trunk, which, with the help of a few mine traps, turns that trunk into a death zone. By standing in front of your nest, your enemies can't easily destroy it unless they come all the way around this bend, while you're also placed in a good position for your healers to support you and your team. Be wary of any annoying flankers coming around this path here, which, if it's becoming an issue, I might throw a mine trap down just to deal with them. In this clip, the enemy had already pushed forward really far, so I did my best to connect the ult to the spider nest and shut down as much space as possible. I punished the Punisher for staying in my webs and also did a ton of damage to their Magneto, which really ended up helping my team win the fight. Next, we move to offense, where you want to focus on placing Peni's nests in locations where they can defend your backline from pressure, or where they can help your team hold their progress after a good push. I also want to say that Peni does not work very well as a solo tank on offense. If you are the only tank on your team while it's your team's turn to attack, then you should switch to a better solo tank. The same thing applies for if your other tank switches midway through a round. Although there is a side path to take to the first point on Klyntar, almost every single game I've played, the main force is always pushed down the middle path. Now, without a shield or walls to place in the front, Peni's job here is not to help create space in the front, but to defend the backline while they work. To do this, I place my nest right here, and my mines right beside it in case any tanks push forward. I then usually try to set up a multi-stack of webs at this corner so that I can better tank shots from my backline. At this point, the goal is to usually wait for your team to get a pick, or for your team to move forward using a healer ult. Once on the point, you want to place your nest down as best you can behind the enemy team, while also laying mine traps where you suspect enemy healers are going to walk during the chaos. In this clip, I get a lot of value out of my ultimate, but I first make the mistake of not connecting it to my spider nest. Always try to first drop your nest and then use your ultimate so that you could get the extra damage from the nest spider drones. Either way, I was able to take out one of the healers, and you may not have noticed, but during my ult, I actually stacked up a couple of mines in that same corner, which ends up taking out their second healer. In my entire climb to Grandmaster, I think only 2 of my teams had ever used this right side to push, but this is how I handle attacking from this side. After your team destroys the wall and you have set up your nest here, you can place mine traps on the edge of the platform to prevent enemies from pushing onto your team. Once you have a stable position to fight from, you can switch to trying to arc your mines into their back line to create mine traps for their healers. This is the closest thing in a high elo game I've found to attacking this point. You can see the nest positioning here is quite strong, but since my team is spread apart and not all fighting here together, as soon as Groot dies, I just focus on getting back to the rest of my squad. When you're pushing up this hallway, it can either be completely free or really quite hectic. If the enemy team chooses to defend at the top of the stairs, then you generally have enemy tanks and melee DPS coming into this area where your healers and ranged DPS like to stand. I place my nest on this ramp, which helps defend my backline while also being nicely protected itself. I then focus on setting up an anti-tank mine trap near the bottom of the ramp until my team has the momentum to push the cart around the corner. Here you can see how my nest positioning is not only damaging their tanks who move too far forward, but it's also creating a safe place for my backline to fight. Here I'm just standing back waiting for my nest to come off cooldown when my team's Spider-Man uses his ult, so I move forward to see if I could help. Because I'd set up a mine trap, when I'm ulted by their Wolverine, he has to literally run away to stop himself from dying, which gives him no value for his ult. Now it's my turn to press Q, but I first place my nest so I get the added damage. I'm then able to not only get a kill, but force out an enemy healer's ult when I push forward with my own. If your team has pushed around the bend and made it into this hallway, then you can destroy these boxes and set your nest up in this cubby hole, which is a very strong position. It really helps cement your team's progress, and with some well-placed mine traps along this back wall, you can catch the enemy team as they turn the corner to contest. Another cool spot you can use if you have another tank to distract the enemy team is up here on this ledge. By placing your nest here, this spot allows your webs to arc down the wall and into the path where the enemy would like to stand. It's also really hard to reach from most characters without them going all the way around. Finally, when the payload has reached the corner, you may want to move your nest to this corner so that it continues to cover the payload as well as still defending your back line. I didn't have enough time to fully set up in the next room, so instead, I replaced my nest to defend my back line before ulting to try and create space for my team. By running past the enemy team and placing mines in their back line, I'm not only able to further block any reinforcements from joining the fight, but I also get a kill on a healer in the back. If you have pushed the enemy out to their spawn, then you want to lock down this room as best as possible. In higher ranks, this means placing your nest behind this box and your mine traps here to lock down this door on the left. In low ranks, the enemy team tends to just take this one door, so you instead place your nest at this corner and make as many mine traps as possible in this room and around this door. In this clip, I see the mantis pushing up from my right and decide to set a mine trap at the door. However, after thinking it through, I set up my nest to cover the other door just in case. After double checking and seeing that the enemy isn't pushing down the easier to defend path, I rush back to the other side, but by that point, I was too late to properly set up any traps. I do my best to defend, but my team wasn't as coordinated as the enemy team, and we ended up getting pushed off the point. From here, you can choose to either flank the enemies and try to distract and destroy their backline, or you can support your team through the bone tunnel.
Nice.
In this case, you would want to place your nest right here and begin trying to lock down targets with your web snare and prevent the enemy tanks from pushing forward onto your team. Alternatively, you could take a left and go either up this hill or down this ramp to harass the enemy backline. Your goal here is to lock down the zone with your spider nest and to kill unsuspecting healers, or at the very least to cause their attention to turn to you and have them face away from their team. Being a distraction can be helpful even without getting kills, but you must not die doing this, so just never overcommit when flanking as Penny. Here's an example of me poking my head behind the enemies, and you can see the healers literally turning around to shoot at me, and I still even get a mine trap kill.
This is gonna hurt. I am ready to put on a show.
Maximum pulse!
Double kill.
For the final push, I nestle my nest inside this cave or behind this tree so I can help my team push forward. Once we have cleared the corner of the tree root, I place my nest behind these rocks, which shuts down that path from their spawn and forces the enemies to fight us from this direction. Many people underestimate how strong zone denial can be in this game, especially when you're fighting characters that like to dive your backline. This includes people like Wolverine, Thor, and the Hulk, or even Cloak and Daggers using their ultimates. And that about wraps things up for this map. I want to thank each and every one of you who watched this video, especially for staying till the end. All the comments and support really do mean so much to me, so thank you.
It's
Subscription.
time!
If you like this video and you want to see more, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe, as that definitely helps me grow the channel. I plan on doing more of these, so comment down below which map you want me to cover next. And finally, if you want to learn where I place my nests and mines on the map Idrisil's Path, click the link at the end of the video. See ya!